Welcome back, everyone, to the Late Night Review. And tonight I'm going to talk about one of my favorite movies of all time, as usual. By the way, this is the show, the Late Night Review, where I talk about movies that I mostly like. There might be an occasional time where I talk about movies I don't like, especially if they're part of a franchise that I really do like, but I don't like the particular movie in that franchise or a particular installment. So that might happen, but I like talking about movies I like. It's a lot less stress and more fun making these videos. And tonight's no exception. I really like this movie. It's one of my favorite mafia movies of all time and one of my favorite organized crime movies, period, of all time. It's Casino with Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Sharon Stone. There's so many great performers and actors in here. James Woods, Don Rickles. I mean, there's a lot of people in here that you've probably seen in other movies that do a good job. And if I were to rank it, this has got to be towards the top of my favorite mafia movies of all time. When I was younger, it was probably The Godfather, and then later it became Goodfellas was my favorite. And when Casino, when that came out, I really liked it a lot, a lot. I mean, a lot. And over the years, even though Goodfellas was usually number one for me, and then The Godfather and the Casino would be like number three or four, maybe behind Godfather 2. But as years have gone by, and the more I've found out about the Casino backstory, what it was inspired and based off of, I think Casino could be like number two or three, maybe even sometimes number one in terms of a list. I've never come up with a list. I've never ranked the movies, the mafia movies that I've seen. Maybe in the future on the channel I might do that one day, but it's risen quite a bit. I like Casino a lot. I think that if I were to do a ranking just off the top of my head, it would probably be Goodfellas, Casino, The Godfather. Maybe Casino and The Godfather would be fighting for that second spot. Carlito's Way is another great organized crime type movie. Carlito is Puerto Rican. He's not an Italian mobster, but he definitely deals with some Italian mobsters in there. There's some Italian mobsters who try to kill him later, and everyone in there is believable. Carlito's Way is one of my favorite movies too, with the great Al Pacino, and that's I really like that movie a lot, and that's also one of my favorites. Casino is probably in number two or three. It might even rise. Over the years, I've liked it more and more. I did some research on it years ago. I'm half Italian. I've always liked watching mafia documentaries. I grew up hearing different stories, and I grew up hearing a lot of different things, and that's part of my. I'm a half Italian, so that's kind of part of my heritage. No, I'm not in the mob. Don't know anyone in the mob, but I grew up hearing a lot of stuff. Always thought mafia documentaries were interesting, and it's kind of funny. I had a coworker uh, when I was doing my security job for many years. I did it for over 16 years. One of my favorite jobs I ever had. Probably my favorite up to that time. 16 years doing mostly graveyard shift. I had a coworker, and we were talking about Casino. We were talking about how good an actor Joe Pesci was and Robert De Niro and all that. And then I looked into the story more. And by the way, my coworker, he's one of those guys that's not afraid to confront anybody and argue with them, get into a confrontation with them. Him and I have gotten into it over the years a number of times, but remained friends. And even though he was confrontational and kind of, he could be aggressive. For some reason, I always like talking to him. And I'll always value our friendship. I'll always look back at that. And I worked with him almost every night, relieved him. His turn to go home, I came to relieve him. But the reason I brought that up is we were talking about what a great actor Joe Pesci was. And he played Nick. His name was Nick Santoro, I believe, in the movie, but he was actually inspired by the real life Tony Spilotro, the real mafia guy. And it's kind of funny. I found out that my coworker had the same birthday as Joe Pesci, February 9th. And then I actually had the same birthday as Tony Spilotro. So it was just kind of funny. We talked about that, and then I looked certain things up, and then I found out that. And there was a few other ironic things that came up, and I won't really go into those because I'm here to talk about the movie tonight, and I kind of got sidetracked a little bit, but it is kind of relevant in the sense that the movie Casino is pretty accurate, and there's other parts though that aren't accurate, like when they put the guy's head in the vice and his eye popped out. That really happened. They really did put the guy's head in a vice and his eye came out, but it wasn't in Las Vegas. It was in Chicago. It was part of the M&M murders, and Tony Spilotro was put in charge of the torture and killing of these two thieves who were kind of terrorizing this certain neighborhood that was off limits. It was a mafia controlled, somewhat controlled neighborhood that they kind of trespassed in, and it was off limit for crimes. You weren't supposed to commit crimes there. It was mafia territory. So he tortured and killed him, put the head in that, one of the guy's head in the vice. His eye came out. So that was true. But in the movie, they portrayed it as happening after Tony Spilotro went to Las Vegas. Actually, it happened in Chicago. It was part of the M&M murders, and that was interesting to find out. I've seen a few more documentaries since then. Sam Rothstein, played by Robert De Niro, was based on Lefty Rosenthal, and the movie's pretty accurate in terms of their relationship too. In the movie, it kind of, there's certain parts like Tony Spilotro. He didn't use all the four-letter words that Joe Pesci used in there. As funny as that was, and he had a lot of funny one-liners in the movie. But in real life, Tony Spilotro, I heard Frank Collada, Hitman, the real deal, who was partners with Tony Spilotro, he said he never used all those four-letter words because he was an advisor on Casino. Frank Collada advised the movie, was an advisor for Martin Scorsese, Joe Pesci, and he told him that he didn't use the F word every other word all the time, every few seconds. But Joe Pesci did that because he thought it made the character seem tougher. But I think Frank Collada said he never really cussed that much, but if you crossed him, if you pushed him, it'd be almost impossible to get rid of him. And that part's true, where if you beat him with your fists, he'll come back with a bat. If you beat him with a bat, he'll come back with a gun. And if you beat him with a gun, you better kill him because he'll keep coming back and back until one of you is dead. So that part was true. Tough guy. And Joe Pesci did a masterful job playing the part. I have to say this, though. Anthony Hopkins, when he was younger, the way he looked, you put him in a suit, comb his hair back when he had thick hair, when he was younger, a little wavy, comb it back, if they put a little gray in the front, he would look like Tony Spilotro a lot. I wish somehow he could have played that part when he was younger, Anthony Hopkins, because Anthony Hopkins is one of my favorite actors. Everyone knows his Hannibal Lecter, the work, with Jodie Foster, great movie, Silence of the Lambs. And then, of course, Hannibal. The beginning of that movie I thought was really good. The second part, I thought they just dropped the ball. But and then Red Dragon was really good. But yeah, Hopkins has always been one of my favorite actors. Really has. Remains of the Day. There was a movie where he played a ventriloquist a long time ago. It's a little scary movie. It's called Magic, where he was a ventriloquist, and I think that dummy kind of came alive. It reminded me of The Twilight Zone. Of course, he was in The Edge. He was in Desperate Hours with Mickey Rourke and Mimi Rogers. He's done a lot of great work. I tell you, when he was younger, I think he could have played Tony Spilotro. I put some pictures up here to kind of compare the two, how they look. If he can, because he was in Nixon, and I heard there was somewhat of a accent issue there. But if he can control, even if the accent got through, Anthony Hopkins' accent, I still think he would have made a great Tony Spilotro because his acting ability can just kind of overshadow everything. Great actor, one of the greats, one of the legends of all time, and a brilliant actor. He would have played the part really well. I would have loved to have seen that. That's kind of one of my dream movies, I guess. Hopkins playing Tony Spilotro, bringing his character to life. The cornfield death with the bats. You know, it almost reminded me of the way the ancient Romans used to take care of certain, like the Roman legions used to have a punishment where they would beat certain soldiers to death who were not obeying orders. Lack of discipline, they'd take sticks and beat them to death. That kind of reminded me what they did with the Nick Santoro character in that cornfield and Casino. That's kind of what it reminded me of. But in real life, because Nick, his character was inspired by Tony Spilotro. In real life, they didn't beat him to death in a cornfield. Him and his brother were actually beaten to death in a house, in the basement of that house, and then buried. Someone testified at a trial that he was actually beaten to death in the basement. Then they drove him to a cornfield somewhere and buried him. I don't believe they were buried alive like in the movie. They could have been, but at the trial, someone testified, and it may or may not be true. They were killed in the basement of that house, beaten to death, and by a whole bunch of guys. Because Tony Spilotro was tough. He can really handle himself well. He's really great with his fist. Frank Collada said that. And I think he had heart problems, though, later on in life. And he probably put up a fight, but there was just too many of them. Him and his brother were surrounded by a whole bunch of guys, and the cause of death was blunt force trauma. And they probably had a lot of guys because they knew how tough the brothers were, especially Tony Spilotro. And then they buried him. And so the movie got a lot of things accurate, but certain things weren't accurate. And then, of course, when you make movies, there's artistic license. You can do different things. But I enjoyed the movie. It is one of my favorite movies of all time. And it probably will rise in the rankings even more. Maybe one day it'll be number 2 or number 1. I don't know. Right now, I think it's Goodfellas. Maybe one day on the channel I'll do a ranking. Not sure about that. But this is one of my favorite movies. There's not a bad performance in here. Everyone plays the part well, and everyone does a good job. I like the casino setting. I like that as the setting for the movie. Obviously, that's where a lot of the real life events took place, so they would have that. But I think the colors, the cinematography is really well done. Love the music. Martin Scorsese, one of the great things about his movies, which adds to the style of his movies, is he chooses great music. I love the music in his movies. I really, really do. I mean, when you got music coming up at a certain time, like he has certain songs for certain scenes, he puts you into the mood and to the type of atmosphere that he wants. Makes you feel the right way for the right scene at the right time with the music he chooses. And he's always been a master at that. Very, very great director, one of the greatest of all time. And this is really one of my favorite movies. Most people have seen it. If you haven't, I would highly recommend that you check it out. And like and subscribe, share this video. And if you click the subscribe button and then the notification button, you'll get a notification every time I put a new video on this channel. So please like and subscribe, share this video, and check out Casino. It's a classic, one of my favorites. Have a good night, everybody.